Our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider John McMullen joins us today talking about tonight's game as well as some NFL news and notes. John, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the Eagles tonight. You have an article up at 97.3 ESPN.com, the 5 Eagles to watch in Pittsburgh. And you started the list at number 5 with Marcus Smith. I thought it was very interesting because, Marcus Smith was injured earlier in camp. He didn't play in the first game. This is a guy who has been the most infamous draft pick. He's been talked about. Is he Chip Kelly's draft pick? Is he Howie Roseman's draft pick? Is he a linebacker? Is he a DN? What is he? How is he going to be? Can he be anything? And it seems like maybe we'll finally get to see him play tonight.
Yeah, and it's big for him because I think early in camp, before he had the concussion, Jim Schwartz was kind of speaking very highly of Marcus Smith, and he thought he had a chance as a 4-3 defensive end because he was basically going to be let loose to rush the passer, and instead of being a 3-4 outside linebacker where you have to read and react, and Marcus had some trouble with it. That was pretty obvious. There's no doubt about that. This was going to be much more simplified for him, and he could take advantage of his athleticism. But the minute we get to the real games, he's on the sidelines again. He's got a concussion, and he wasn't able to play against Tampa Bay. And all of a sudden, Stephen Means pops out of nowhere, and he's playing very, very well. So I think people are putting two and two together, realizing, hey, Marcus Smith is a former first-round pick, but it's not. Doug Peterson doesn't care about that. Jim Schwartz doesn't care about this. This is a completely new coaching staff. So unless he shows something on the field, I think a lot of people think there's a chance he's going to be cut. I don't count myself among them because I've talked to enough people to say that, to understand that Jim is very excited about his athleticism and his ability to potentially be a pass rusher in the rotation on this defensive line. But he's got to get on the field and he's got to show something to make that opinion valid.
Staying on the defensive side of the ball, John, I wanted to ask you about the situation with the linebackers. It seems like they traded to get a wide receiver. We know they have offensive line depth issues. We know about the running backs, but the one spot on the defense seems to be linebacker. I know they apparently the reports talked 2 weeks ago, Stephen Tulloch. That deal never came to fruition. So what are you looking for from the linebackers tonight? We saw Joe Walker play pretty well last week, but we know he's basically a backup. What can we expect to see from the linebackers tonight?
Well, I think that continues to be the most likely position that the Eagles will look outside the organization once the cuts start to happen. The first cut from 90 to 75, then obviously 75 to 53. I think on that big cut, I think it's likely that the Eagles bring in some depth at the linebacker position because there's really only 5 guys they're comfortable with. And the starters are obviously Jordan Hicks, Michael Kendricks, and Nigel Bradham. But Michael, he's going to miss the second straight preseason game with hamstring issues, so that's a concern. Najee Good will be the starter. They're fine with him. He'll be the main backup, I think, at all 3 positions, to be honest. And then Joe Walker, as you mentioned, the coaching staff likes what he's been able to bring to the table. But after that, it drops off the table. You're talking about undrafted rookie free agents like Quentin Gauss and Mike Tavares. And they haven't shown enough to say that they're going to be NFL players at this point. They have an opportunity again tonight, but I still don't think when push comes to shove, the Eagles are going to be comfortable with what they have in-house. And that's why when it comes to I think they're going to look at the waiver wire, and I think you're going to see a body or even 2 brought in at the linebacker position.
John McMullen's with us here in the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles in Pittsburgh tonight. We're going through some of the 5 Eagles that John says you should be watching. Coming in at number 4, quarterback Sam Bradford. And I know, John, that in the first game, he wasn't in there that long. 3 plays isn't a big sample size. But at the same time, the one play that he did complete it looked like he had Ertz open down the field, but chose to check down to Selleck, and that scares me because that makes me feel already one game, and boy, we're going to have another season of 8-yard throws.
Well, it was only one throw, but yeah, everybody was chuckling because Sam is known for checking down, and he's very comfortable with it at this point. And there's a fine line that obviously the great quarterbacks are able to traverse and about taking shots down the field and also taking what the defense gives you. But Sam is, in the past, too often he's been willing to take the simplest way, and that's a dump off. So he mentioned earlier this week at practice he wants to get into a rhythm. He wants to be out there, and he's going to get an opportunity tonight. He's going to play at least a quarter, and Doug said he'll probably play into the second quarter, depending how the number of plays goes and how everything shakes out. So this will be our first opportunity to look at Sam and look at these receivers together and see if they can generate anything. Obviously, the receivers, Jordan Matthews still not going to be able to play. Dorial Green-Beckham is making the trip. He made the trip, but he's not going to play. So this is the time that players like Nelson Agholor and Ruben Randall, they have to start stepping up.
And that's your number two wide receiver, Nelson Agholor. Now, I was surprised, John. I listened to Agholor's comments yesterday about the acquisition of Green-Beckham, and he didn't seem to be concerned about it. And I thought, shouldn't that light a fire under your rear end? I mean, what were your thoughts on how Nelson Agholor's reaction was to DGB showing up, and what, in your mind, will it take for the light bulb to go on for Nelson Agholor?
Well, it was one of two things. Either he's clueless or he's just trying to, be a sort of play it off and not make a big deal out of it, because it's pretty evident that the Eagles brought in DGB to take Nelson Agholor's job. If he performs at the level the Eagles expect him to, he's going to be the starting wide receiver opposite Jordan Matthews. And clearly, he was brought in because the Eagles don't have a lot of confidence in what they've seen from Nelson Agholor to this point. And by the way, they shouldn't, because that's the player they wanted to take that position. And he's done nothing to this point to seize his opportunity. So, yeah, if this doesn't create a spark, as I said at 973ESPN.com, what is going to create a spark for Nelson Agholor? This is it. This is your second year as a professional. You were awful. There's no other way to describe it. In your rookie season, you haven't been good in this preseason. And then on top of that, you add into the off-the-field issues he had and he created for the organization. So there's a lot of strikes. And at some point, just what I said about Marcus Smith, remember, you can talk about him being the number one pick all you want. He's not a number one pick of Doug Peterson. He's not a number one pick of this coaching staff. So they don't have any loyalties to Nelson Agholor. And if he doesn't start producing, he's going to be in the conversation of moving on from.
Staying with the wide receivers, John, I wanted to ask you, with Dorial Green-Beckham now a Philadelphia Eagle, even though he's not playing tonight, who is more likely on the bubble at the wide receiver position, Ruben Randall or Chris Givens?
I think Randall, because Givens has the trait that the Eagles don't really have, and that's deep speed. So he's the kind of guy who can stretch the defense. And that's something really Philadelphia hasn't had since Deshaun Jackson. Now, I don't want to compare Chris Givens to Deshaun Jackson because they're not close as players, but he brings that one trait to the football field that they haven't had, and that's something that Randall cannot bring. So I would think of those two. It's more Ruben Randall. Nelson Agholor is probably going to make this football team. He should be in that conversation. He really should, because he's been even worse than Randall and Givens. But his pedigree of being a first-round pick will save him for one more season. And Josh Huff, I know everyone wants to cut him in Philadelphia, but when you're a backup receiver and you're going to be a fifth or sixth receiver, you have to contribute on special teams, and that's what Josh can do. He's their best kick returner, so I think that will save him. And you're going to look more towards the veteran. And right now, Ruben Randall stands out on that list.
Shifting over to the offensive line, you have 2 offensive linemen on your list of 5 guys to watch tonight. At right tackle, you have Alan Barbary making the move, and then you have at left guard Isaac Seumalo, who started practicing with the first team, and he's obviously getting an opportunity to play, John. I wanted to start with Seumalo, and then you can move over to Barbary. With Seumalo, it's interesting because in the first game, he had some moments where he really looked like a rookie. In other moments, he looked okay. So I want to ask you, John, how much of a step up does he need to do? Does he need to be a lot better than the last game, a decent amount better than the last game? Do you think for the Eagles to actually put the check mark next to his name at that position?
Well, I think number one, I think it's the next 2 weeks because I think he's going to start in both games. And I think after week 3 in the preseason, which is the key for the starters, they'll make their decision. And I think their whole mentality is they kind of know what Steven Wisniewski is, and they know what he can do. So they don't really need to find out a lot more about him. With Seumalo, I mentioned yesterday, they're kind of throwing him into the deep end of the pool. He did not play well last week. He hasn't looked ready. And if he continues to play like he did against the Bucs, he's not going to be the starter at left guard when Lane Johnson is eventually suspended. It's going to be Wisniewski. But as I said, it's one of those situations where they know what they have with the veteran. They're not going to learn anything new. And with Seumalo, they're trying to see if they can get him up to speed as quickly as possible.
John McMullen's with us now. John, Jason Peters is something we'll be keeping an eye on tonight as well. Not getting any younger, injury prone. How long do you think he goes tonight, and what specifically will you be looking for out of him?
Well, you don't have to look for anything as far as playing goes. Jason's still a very, very good left tackle when he's on the field. The only thing you have to worry about, as you mentioned, Pete, is he's 34 years old now, and these injuries keep cropping up, and at least the quad, it could be a chronic injury at this stage. So that's what you have to keep an eye on. When he's out on the field, you know he's going to perform at a pretty high level, and he's scheduled, like all the other starters, to be out there for about a quarter and a half, depending on how many plays the Eagles run. And he'll be out with that group, and it's going to be a week-to-week thing with Jason Peters all year because it's you're not worried about his performance, you're worried about his health.
And how about the running back position? How do you see that battle shaping out?
Well, very similar in a different way because Ryan Matthews isn't an aging player, but he's got his own injury issues. He's really talented, and he is far and away their best running back. There's no question about that. But his history is his history, and he's had a very difficult time staying on the field. He played 16 games once in San Diego, and he had a Pro Bowl season. He's that good. He's a physical, punishing, one-cut runner, but it's hard to imagine him staying on the field for 16 games. So that's where the depth comes into it. You know what Darren Sproles gives you. He's going to be the third down back, but the key is you need somebody to carry the load when Ryan's not going to be there. And Wendell Smallwood, the rookie, hasn't been around. He'll be playing his first preseason game tonight, so he'll be another name to watch. And Kenyon Barner is what he is. He's not a bad player, but he's certainly not the kind of guy you want to hand the football to 20 times. If you need to do that, you're probably not going to be a success in the NFL.
John, I want to transition over to the NFL as a whole right now. John covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. You can follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL news. John, 3 guys are going to meet with the NFL now. We spoke about this yesterday. It seems like they've had time to think about it. They've made their decision. It looks like Harrison, Matthews, and Peppers are going to meet with the NFL, and I assume that means they will at least forego being suspended. Is that a good assumption?
Yeah, they're certainly not going to be suspended for the personal conduct aspect of it. They were going to be suspended for that, for not cooperating. So that's off the table. They're going to meet, in my estimation, what I said yesterday, and it was kind of borne out by how they handled Peyton Manning. It was a very strange strategy by the NFLPA because, to me, the NFL's drug policy, and now it's jointly negotiated, so you have to throw in the NFLPA as well, or they'll yell at me. But it's always been a public relations policy, nothing more. And I said from day one, I told you guys yesterday on the show, if they do the interview, they're going to get rubber stamped and they're going to play. It's as simple as that. This was always about just sort of putting on the dog and pony show for the general public and say, look, we're trying to get to the bottom of this. We talked to these guys. We cleared them. Now it's time to get the football, and that's going to be the end game. All these guys are going to be there week one.
Transitioning back onto the field, the Broncos have announced what they're going to do with their quarterback competition. They're going to start Simeon for the next game, and then Sanchez is going to come in after him, and it seems like it's pretty much come down to just Simeon and Sanchez, just like a lot of people assumed. From your perspective, do you think this is Mark Sanchez's job to lose, or do you think Trevor Simeon can actually do enough to actually win this job?
Yeah, I don't think he can, to tell you the truth. I think it's going to be Mark Sanchez's job, and I think Gary Kubiak's been intent on making it a competition. He didn't want to hand anything to Mark Sanchez. So he does what you normally do when you have a competition. You have Sanchez start week one. You have Simeon start week two, and then the winner will start week three in the preseason, the dress rehearsal game, and I expect that to be Sanchez. And I said from the start, it's very difficult if you're Gary Kubiak and you have that defense and those defensive players. It's very hard to go in the locker room and say, hey, we're going to start a seventh-round pick from last year that's got a couple kneel downs versus the guy who's got 72 NFL starts, and that's what Mark Sanchez is. Not, we all know in Philadelphia Mark Sanchez is not a great quarterback, but when you have Von Miller and all those guys on the defensive side, all you need to do, as they did last year by winning the Super Bowl, is not make a ton of mistakes, and you're going to win a lot of football games. And I think they're going to be more comfortable with a veteran presence.
John, how about some of the positions that I get to keep asking about? It seems I'm the one that always remembers, oh, yeah, what about the kickers? Or, oh, yeah, what about the long snappers?
Well, the kickers, that really hasn't been a competition because Caleb Sturgis has just blown out Cody Parkey throughout training camp. And I think by my unofficial count, throughout not only the games and the practices at the link, but the practices that aren't open to the public, Sturgis has missed 3 kicks the entire camp, and Parkey's missed 10. So it hasn't been close. And Sturgis has also shown the stronger leg. So he would have to be colossally bad over the next 2 weeks to lose that job. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's Caleb Sturgis. As far as the long snapper, John Dorenbos has settled in again. It looks like he's going to hold on to the job for another season. And that's a little bit of a surprise to me because he wasn't his normal self last year. But maybe it was by bringing in some competition. Maybe they sort of lit a fire under him and he realized it. And he's been performing a lot better.
John, one final question for you back to the NFL here. So the Chargers, they still don't have Joey Bosa under contract, but they do have something else going for them. They have ballot measure C on the ballot, trying to get the taxes set up for the construction of their new stadium. You know, we know that the San Diego wants to keep the Chargers in town. The Chargers had considered moving to Los Angeles. Do you think there's a high possibility this measure will get passed?
You never say it's a high probability in California. It's a really difficult political environment. It's a very liberal state. And if you look at the timing, the San Francisco 49ers obviously have already gotten a new stadium built in Santa Clara. The Rams are getting it done in Inglewood. And there's some thought from politicians when you say there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence, and there's a lot of politicians in San Diego that don't want to outlay any expenses towards a potential stadium, even though obviously in that weather, in that city, you're basically guaranteeing yourselves multiple Super Bowls, and that would bring tremendous money into the city. But there's just certain people, their political beliefs, their political ideology is you don't subsidize billionaires, and that's how they look at things. So it's a very difficult political environment, but if you're looking, I would say 60-40 at least, it gets done. Certainly the majority of the people of San Diego want to get the stadium done. So it really comes down to a lobbying effort, and it looks like they've been able to get enough good publicity in their corner that they're finally going to be able to get over the hurdle.
I've been out there a few times, John, for baseball to Petco Park and in that downtown area in the gas lamp district and stuff. And I know from speaking with the locals there that the Chargers are the ones that stir the drink, and they were very afraid that they might leave town. And I think there is support there. But then I see your other point too about don't subsidize billionaires. So there's definitely, yes, it is a unique environment when you spend time in San Diego. But to me, the overlying thing would be that Super Bowl argument of if you're going to bring millions of dollars in by being able to get one, maybe two Super Bowls through the life of a stadium, that to me would be the slam dunk.
Yeah, it should be from a fiscal standpoint. There's no question. It makes a ton of sense for the city as a whole. But as again, it's tough for people to give up on certain ideologies, and that's similar thing has happened up north in California with Oakland, because they're fourth in line to get a stadium done in that political state, and that's going to be almost impossible for them. So I think San Diego is going to get it done, but I don't think Oakland is going to get it done.
John McMullen is our Eagles insider over at 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. Eagles game is tonight starting at 7 o'clock. John, we'll be watching your Twitter feed for any updates.
Yeah, it's exciting week 2 of the preseason, so, everyone calm down. Don't get your heart going too quickly, but and if you're tuning in to watch Ben Roethlisberger, don't bother, because he's not going to be there. Well, he's going to be there, but he's not playing.
Right, he'll be in the building, but he won't play.
He'll be in the building.
He'll be a bystander without pads on the sideline, right?
Exactly.
John, appreciate the time.
The baseball cap is on. Thanks.